people a little bit of insight into what we're doing here. Obviously, around the country, there's lots of different opportunities that have arisen as a result of the current pandemic that we're dealing with, and we're really seeking this as an opportunity to help us reach out to our customers that we've had all over the country and to give them a chance to upskill themselves, to learn more about the products that a lot of them already have, and to make sure you're getting the most out of your investments. So we're really pleased to be able to bring this first webinar to this audience, and hopefully it's the first of many, and we find that people really see some value in being able to see us no matter how far apart you are. Doing this has really been giving us an opportunity to be present for all of you, and we're only as far away as a Zoom call, so it's really, really good to see.
Very good. We might get started now.
Sure, mate.
Yep, cool. Just welcome, guys, to this webinar. We thank you for your time. My name's Jarrod Harder from Word of Mouth Technology. I'd like to introduce Andrew Willis. He's the Director of Word of Mouth Technology.
Thanks, Jarrod.
We thank you for your time. Obviously, you've got busy schedules and so forth, and this is your private time after school. I understand that you guys finished a little earlier than us, so we do thank you for taking this time to watch this webinar with us, Hearing and Understanding in the Classroom. So I'm just going to share the screen with you.
For the guys that are waiting, if you haven't participated in a webinar before, just to make sure you know as well, there's a little chat box or a Q&A section. You can pop up and ask a question at any time throughout the webinar, and we'll answer those live. So please feel free to participate. This is very interactive, and all questions will be answered, no matter how challenging they might be.
And how's our view there, guys?
Really good, Jarrod.
Thank you.
So I'll take the first one if you like, give people a bit of a background into word of mouth technology. There's a lot going on this slide, but as you can see, we do a lot of stuff. Although today is about the products that we have that support people within the education sector, our company was founded in 1993 by my parents, Bob and Betty Willis. My father's profoundly deaf. He's got 2 cochlear implants. And our business has evolved from a company that developed a lot of deaf alerting technology and worked with telecommunication projects to a company that now distributes products around the country that specialise in supporting people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And we're also proud to partner with Front Row in Australia as a reseller for their products in schools. And particularly today, we're going to focus on their Soundfield range of products. But our offering is quite diverse, as you can see.
So what we're going to cover today, guys, is we're going to look at the issues that the students themselves might be facing on a daily basis. We're going to cover the challenges that occur in the classroom on a daily basis, and also then just go through a few past Soundfield studies and trials. And there's one particular trial that actually took place in an Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander location. And then we're going to talk about how to overcome all those issues and challenges, in particular with regards to a Soundfield system. So one thing we're going to cover with the students is auditory processing disorder, or APD. So as you see, about 5% of the children there may suffer from APD. And in basic form, it just means the brain can't process what it's hearing properly. There's some distortion as it goes into the brain. But in particular, kids that are in those classrooms that may be diagnosed or undiagnosed with APD, they suffer greatly when there's a lot of outside noise that's impacting their classroom. So those kids, because they can't hear or understand properly, they might be either distracted or lazy because it's very hard for them to hear, or they might become disruptive because they get bored and they just want to play up.
When you're looking at the classrooms today, we often have the conversation with school leaders, teams, business managers around the fact that perhaps some of our technology is not relevant to them because they don't have any kids with those needs. And we really want to just reinforce the fact that no matter who you are or where your school is situated, it's quite likely that you are exactly like every other school, and that about 43% of the kids in primary level schools we know will fail a hearing test on any given day. And that's not because they have a diagnosed hearing loss, it's because they have a cold or a middle ear infection. For the northern states of Australia, they have a higher proportion of kids for whom otitis media or glue ear is a serious problem. So you have all of these kids in your school. So all of you have students who have hearing difficulties, even though they're not turning up wearing hearing aids. You will also have students for whom may or may not have a diagnosis for ASD, and we know it's proven that for kids on the spectrum, classrooms with a higher level of background noise create higher levels of anxiety in those kids. And the age of the kids as well. The younger the kids are, the less maturity their listening or auditory pathways have. What does that mean in plain English? It just means they haven't got the life experience to fill in the gaps when they miss stuff. So as adults, when we're listening in a pub or a noisy environment, if we miss the words that that person's saying, we're able to fill the gaps in because we've got a lot of experience through life to know what they might be saying. Kids lack the ability to put that into context, which is what leads to the misunderstanding of what's being said. And they obviously don't have the confidence to put their hands up and say, sorry, I didn't understand what you said there. And also we look at kids for whom English is a second language. Now, this can mean our overseas students who are settled with migrant families in Australia, but also a proportion of our Indigenous kids for whom English is a second language. And when we have those students in a classroom, we know that it's harder for them to discriminate words when there's background noise. So background noise is a big problem for everyone in these classrooms.
And I know when I go into classrooms, to schools, either talking to existing users or particularly new users, and talk about the things about undiagnosed hearing loss or undiagnosed autism or anything like that, or APD. I know that on every occasion it's either been the teacher said, I've got at least one, if not more, students that they would think could fall into that category. So moving on now from the student themselves to the actual classroom environment. So there's three major, I'm going to talk about the acoustics of that classroom environment. So three major components make up that: ambient noise, which is an internal and external. So on this diagram here, the external is coming in from the hallway, from the discussions, not in the classroom, and obviously from that car outside. We talk about reverberation and echo, or echo, and then we cover off signal to noise ratio. Now, each one of these components can either determine the difference of a positive or learning experience. So we're just going to go onto a quick 4 to 5 minute video clip TED Talk, and it covers about the way we talk and listen, but how it's impacted by the actual classroom itself, the environment, and how acoustics and how sound travels. And there's also a particular one that I'd like you to keep an eye on, which talks about when the classroom environment is really noisy, how it impacts on the stress levels of the teacher themselves. So Andrew and I will say goodbye. And we'll come back in a minute, guys, and we'll just play this for you.
Time to start designing for our ears. Architects and designers tend to focus exclusively on these. They use these to design with, and they design for them, which is why we end up sitting in restaurants that look like this and sound like this, shouting from...
Does that come on, Andrew?
No, I just can't see the video, Jarrod. So just
excuse me.
Try that one again. Just getting the videos work every time we go through a test run here, and that's okay. We know that we've got a captive audience here, and they're all listening tentatively, and we've given them a teaser about what this video might have on it. So don't go anywhere.
It's time to start designing for our ears. Architects and designers tend to focus exclusively on these. They use these to design with, and they design for them, which is why we end up sitting in restaurants that look like this and sound like this, shouting from a foot away to try and be heard by our dinner companion, or why we get on aeroplanes, which cost £200 million, with somebody talking through an old-fashioned telephone handset on a cheap stereo system, making us jump out of our skins. We're designing environments that make us crazy. And it's not just our quality of life which suffers, it's our health, our social behavior, and our productivity as well. How does this work? Well, two ways. First of all, ambience. I have a whole TED talk about this. Sound affects us physiologically, psychologically, cognitively, and behaviorally all the time. The sound around us is affecting us, even though we're not conscious of it. There's a second way, though, as well. That's interference. Communication requires sending and receiving. And I have another whole TED talk about the importance of conscious listening. But I can send as well as I like, and you can be brilliant conscious listeners. If the space I'm sending in is not effective, that communication can't happen. Spaces tend to include noise and acoustics. A room like this has acoustics. This one, very good acoustics. Many rooms are not so good. When I see a classroom that looks like this, can you imagine how this sounds? I'm forced to ask myself a question. Now, that's a little unfair. Some of my best friends are architects, and they definitely do have ears, but I think sometimes they don't use them when they're designing buildings. Here's a case in point. This is a £32 million flagship academy school, which was built quite recently in the UK and designed by one of Britain's top architects. Unfortunately, it was designed like a corporate headquarters with a vast central atrium and classrooms leading off it with no back walls at all. The children couldn't hear their teachers. They had to go back in and spend £600,000 putting the walls in. Let's stop this madness of open-plan classrooms right now, please. It's not just these modern buildings which suffer. Old-fashioned classrooms suffer too. A study in Florida just a few years ago found that if you're sitting where this photograph was taken in a classroom, row 4, speech intelligibility is just 50%. Children are losing one word in 2. Now, that doesn't mean they only get half their education, but it does mean they have to work very hard to join the dots and understand what's going on. This is affected massively by reverberation time, how reverberant a room is. In a classroom with a reverberation time of 1.2 seconds, which is pretty common, this is what it sounds like.
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the simple zero.
Not so good, is it? If you take that 1.2 seconds down to 0.4 seconds by installing acoustic treatments, sound-absorbing materials, and so forth, this is what you get.
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the simple zero.
What a difference. Now, that education you would receive, and thanks to the British acoustician Adrian James for those simulations. The signal was the same, the background noise was the same, all that changed was the acoustics of the classroom in those two examples. If education can be likened to watering a garden, which I think that's a fair metaphor, sadly, much of the water is evaporating before it reaches the flowers, especially for some groups. For example, those with hearing impairment. Now, that's not just deaf children. That could be any child who's got a cold, glue ear, an ear infection, even hay fever. On a given day, 1 in 8 children fall into that group on any given day. Then you have children for whom English is a second language, or whatever they're being taught in is a second language. In the UK, that's more than 10% of the school population. And finally, after Susan Cain's wonderful TED Talk in February, we know that introverts find it very difficult to relate when they're in a noisy environment doing group work. Add those up, that is a lot of children who are not receiving their education properly. It's not just the children who are affected, though. This study in Germany found the average noise level in classrooms is 65 decibels. I have to really raise my voice to talk over 65 decibels of sound. And teachers are not just raising their voices. This chart maps the teacher's heart rate against the noise level. Noise goes up, heart rate goes up. That is not good for you. In fact, 65 decibels is the very level at which this big survey of all the evidence on noise and health found that that is the threshold for the danger of myocardial infarction. To you and me, that's a heart attack. It may not be pushing the boat out too far to suggest that many teachers are losing significant life expectancy by teaching in environments like that day after day. What does it cost to treat a classroom down to that 0.4 second reverberation time? £2,500. And the Essex study, which has just been done in the UK, which incidentally showed that when you do this, you do not just make a room that's suitable for hearing impaired children. You make a room where behavior improves and results improve significantly.
I'll just, Jarrod, we're just not able to hear you at the moment, but...
Yes, I'm back online, mate. Sorry.
Right.
What have we got there, Andrew?
So we just want to stop share. You can stop. That's it.
That's it? Cool.
Yep. So signal to noise. When we talk about the signal to noise ratio, I mean, that's something that's highlighted in the video that we just saw. And I think even just hearing that video increases my anxiety levels just because of the noise in it when they present you with those environments where the background noise is much louder, and it's really a reflection of what we do see in lots of classrooms. And while we're not talking about technology that necessarily improves acoustics in a classroom, we are talking about technology that helps to enhance the signal to noise ratio. And that is basically the signal being the sound we want to hear, the teacher's voice, the student's voice, and the noise, which is the noise or the background noise in the classroom. And this SNR is the measurement of that signal to noise ratio. Now, ideally, we'd like to see plus 15, but realistically, we know that that's not necessarily achievable even with good technology. Plus 10 dB, though, is a good outcome. And that's the reality of the classroom, is that to achieve plus 10 dB, you can't do it naturally, because the ambient noise in the classroom might be at 50 or 55 dB, and that teacher, to maintain their voice 10 decibels above that background noise, is going to be having a day off by the end of the week because of the suffering. They'll be affected by vocal fatigue.
Going on from that, we're now going to talk about how sound actually travels within the classroom. So inverse square law is a law of physics. In this case, it's regarding to sound. So we've just gone through talking about noise room level within the classroom. In this diagram here, you see that the level on that dotted line is measured at 47 decibels. The teacher herself, she's speaking at a level of 65 decibels. But as we move 2 meters, it drops 6 decibels. So as we double that distance, it reduces by 6 decibels. So to the back of the classroom there, it's less 18. What's more critical here, though, is when we get to the back of the class, that signal that the teacher was using, was talking and speaking, is now dropped below that classroom noise level. So those kids at the back of the room are going to find it, A, hard to hear, but more importantly, hard to understand. So they'll know that the teacher's talking, but understanding what she's saying is going to be very, very hard to do. And even those kids in the middle there, it's getting close to, as Andrew said, we're trying to get it above that, and ideally we'd like to get it above that 10 decibels.
You're right, Jarrod, too.
Really critical.
That slide also just often gets a lot of feedback from the teachers, and everybody who's watching today is probably saying the same thing. Oh yeah, that explains it. You know, that's why those kids that sit at the back are always the disruptive one. I mean, that term has been going on for years, that disruptive kids sit at the back and we put them at the front when we want them to listen. Well, the part of the problem with that is the fact that we're just putting them in a position where they're at a disadvantage from the beginning in being able to hear and maintain attention.
So now we're going to move on just to Soundfield Studies and trials. So we're going to discuss and find out why and what these things can do for you. So the first one actually study took place in 1977. So what they said in the TED talk was to take them off, they'll take them off site. And this is what happened in the States too. So if they had some hearing disability or whatever it may be, they would have been taken off site to a specialist class, which was obviously a fairly big economical expense. So they were looking for something to reduce those costs and to leave the kids on campus. So they come up with just trying a microphone and speaker system. What they found though was, and they were doing it all for these kids with hearing disabilities, they found that all the students regarding of their hearing ability showed significant gains in both academic achievement and learned more at a rapid rate. We then move now on to 2015 in the York study. So they reinforce the Mars, and as you'll see with the dictated spelling results and also the means between amplified and unamplified rooms, those averages there of what their results were, I suppose I want you guys to more focus on what's there as far as typed in the red. So the teacher's feedback, again, reinforcing what was said in the TED talk in that last section to say they were better behaved, more confident, better listeners. And the other thing was, and that means less stress for you guys, the other thing is vocal fatigue issues. So because this is a Soundfield system actually amplifies your voice, it means you don't have to use your teacher's voice as much. We then move on to the study that took place it was reported and put in the journal in 2004, the Soundfield amplification for kids in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. So again, understanding that there's different cultural differences within these regions and communities, different health issues, which higher otitis media or glue studies. So there was a study that was more specific for you guys in those communities. So it was an 8-week trial. They chose 2 locations in Queensland, so just out of an Indigenous rural community just out of Brisbane, and a coastal community just in far north Queensland, north of Cairns. And the whole idea was they would have the systems operating on a 2-week on-off basis. Prior to the starting of the trial and the study, they actually tested the kids. They gave them a hearing test. Now, going back to the first couple of slides, we spoke about undiagnosed hearing loss and so forth. So in this one, you can see that 20% had normal hearing. I dare say for these kids, because they were only 6 to 10 years old, this is probably the first hearing test they've ever had in their life. So only 20%, so more than 80% of that classroom, those tested students had some kind of hearing loss. And when you move up to mild and moderate hearing loss, that's close to getting some assistive product, whether it's a hearing aid. The other thing they found was, talking about classroom acoustics, that it was really a bad environment for that. And the signal-to-noise ratio virtually had the teacher's voice being softer than what was coming in from outside classrooms. The study itself, the teachers, they had independent observers come in and watch them on a regular basis and report on what they saw. But I also asked for the personal observations of the teachers prior and during the actual study itself. So the results were, they're not so much results driven as far as grading. It was more about the actual classroom environment and the culture that was going on and the behaviour. So what they saw here was that the teacher and students interacted more, and more importantly, the students peer-to-peer, they interacted more. And they found that the students grew in confidence and greater interaction, and the kids would actually initiate a lot more of those interactions. So as we go through the studies, you'll see that they sort of keep coming up with the same outcomes.
I think that Jarrod highlights the stuff that's really nice and sort of tangible, I suppose, for a lot of the people who are listening, and that is the fact that you can have all the data you like about improved literacy scores and NAPLAN results, but the real stuff that makes people feel good is the fact that you hear the stories about kids participating more in the conversation, and if we can do that, we know that we're on the right track. And this is another little bit of a tool that you could access. Again, it's a free tool that we encourage teachers to look at, just to give them some skills to educate their kids in their classroom about the ambient noise levels in the room. It's a simple app. It measures the background noise, reverberation time of your classroom, and it gives you some traffic light indication. And we find once we start to educate some of the kids about these challenges, they're part of solving the problem, and they really love getting on board with it, and it's only positive. So this slide here, what we're talking about is, getting to the bottom of what does a Soundfield system do? Well, it's speakers and microphones, right? But why is it different to a standard speaker or a microphone? It's because it's designed to be used in a classroom. It's designed for teachers, it's designed for students. So the one thing you want to do is make it easier to use, but the outcome is that it makes sound distribute more evenly across the classroom. So it increases the volume of the speech of the people that use their microphones. It reduces the teacher's vocal fatigue and improves the signal-to-noise ratio. One of the key differences over a normal sound system, though, is that we're aiming to increase the higher frequencies of speech And they're the parts that carry the meaning and understanding in what you're saying. So we all know that we have a teacher who will say, I don't think I need a Soundfield system. I've got a loud voice. I'm the drama teacher. I can be heard everywhere. The point is, a loud voice is not necessarily clear, nor is it necessarily pleasant to listen to for a prolonged period of time. And more to the point, the louder you are, the more likelihood there is less emphasis on the higher frequencies of your speech. And they carry all the meaning in what you're saying. So all those high frequency sounds, which are the consonants, like the f, the p, cap, cat, those sorts of sounds, you can't yell. And because you can't yell them, they get lost in a room that's full of noise. And that's the idea with the Soundfield system, increasing those softer frequencies that you can't increase yourself. When we do that, students hear, but they understand. And as a result, they're going to be more engaged and more included in the classroom and have a better concentration level. And of course, when we do all that, we have better student outcomes. When we look at the Front Row offering of products, it's important to just emphasize that Front Row is not a company that just sells speakers and microphones. Front Row is a company that's invested in the whole suite of solutions for educational spaces. And we love being a Front Row reseller and part of the Front Row family, because we don't just sell a speaker and a microphone. We sell a product that school can come back to us in a year or so time and say, you know what? We love our Junos in our classroom, but our school bells are on the blink. And they love it when we tell them you can just connect your Juno system to the network and that can function as the school bells. We love the fact that we have robust solutions like the Front Row to Go. It's been around for years, but it's still a proven product that schools love to use outside of assemblies or for their PE teachers. So it's a company that's invested in enhancing and improving performance in schools specifically. It's not an AV company that just makes speakers and microphones. It's about stuff that's focused on enhancing education. And Jarrod's going to talk to you now specifically about the Front Row Juno that you can see here on his screen.
So as we've been mainly talking about what happens inside the classroom, we want to focus today in this session about the actual Front Row Juno. There's always an opportunity to talk more about the conductor and the Front Row to Go at a later webinar. But I want to let you know, guys, we've sent plenty of these products, the Junos, to the Northern Territory. We've already supplied to quite a few schools in the region. We've also supplied just recently to schools in North and Far North WA. So the bonus is we don't have to go with it. I'd love to. Mind you, to get out of Victoria would be great at this time, considering lockdown, but it's virtually in a box. Take it out of the box, sit at the front of the room, and you can plug and play, and away you go. It needs to be at the front of the room, off the ground though. Be mindful of that. It needs to be on either a cabinet or a bench. And the reason for that is, one, this distributes the sound horizontally across the room. So if we've got it on the ground, it's going to get blocked either by yourself or the student sitting in front of it. So getting it off the ground, make sure we get greater coverage. In this situation here, it's sitting on the table stand. You can take that off, and we can put just a simple TV mount on the back of that, and you can wall mount it if that's more secure for you. And the other thing is, being at the front half, the reason for that is the kids we're designed to actually take more sound on from the front and the side, and it's a bit unusual to get that sound coming from the back. And what tends to happen too, there are other products that are out there that actually get recommended that it's put to the back, and the reason for that is the feedback. What tends to happen is the teachers do like to make sure they can hear themselves, so you tend to amp up that volume, which means you get a really noisy, you haven't actually reduced the actual classroom noise. And that's what these do. They actually, when they start using it, it'll reduce the classroom noise. And it sounds weird, but it's about that clarity and those higher frequencies. This is a hands-free operation, so it's an IR system. This is the receiver, and this is the transmitter on the microphones. Infrared means that there's a signal bouncing around the room, off the ceiling and the walls, and it's being received here at the top. So whatever you do, don't put a hat on that, and just be mindful, don't cover up your microphones with any clothing, because it'll interrupt the signal. The good thing about that is we can walk around hands-free. We can turn our back to the system, right on the wall. We can write on the whiteboard or the screen. We can read a book and walk around and still have that signal be picked up, and then the sound transmitted across the room evenly. The other bonus is, and some fear factor for teachers is, what if I leave the microphone and I want to go to the toilet by mistake, or I want to go out in the hall room and either have a private conversation with a staff member or student? There's no fear, because once you're outside of that room, the signal's not going to work. So just, I sort of say, relate it to your TV remote control. You need to be in the room where the system is for it to operate. So the microphones are on or off. It's a fairly basic system as far as that goes, or operation. They're muted or they're off. The speaker itself, it'll go into standby mode. First thing in the morning, you want to come in and this LCD screen is going to be blank. To wake it up, you either tap the screen or tap your mic, turn your mic on, and it'll wake it up. So it's one less thing that teachers have to worry about at the end of the day when they're powering all the other things down, whether it's screens, projectors, computers, whatever it may be. So this system here comes with a speaker, teacher's pendant mic, student pass-around mic, and a charging dock. So with the charging, they literally drop it in and it takes 2 or 3 hours. And once they're fully charged, they get 8 hours off it. If they do happen to take it home, they can charge them. There's a USB port on the bottom of this. So, and some teachers have taken their pendant mic home because they forgot to take it off. This is one of the greatest experiences that happens for every trial we do, for every installation that we do, for any new user. So we really recommend that the teachers use this a lot. And the reason for that is no longer do they have to repeat what that quiet, shy child says anymore. This is going to take care of that. You now understand, hopefully understand greater how the signal travels and how the sound travels and how the signal to noise ratio and all that outside noise coming in impacts that. Now that kid at the back is going to hear all those conversations. So don't just use it. We recommend you don't just use it for presentations. This is, as I said, if you use this a lot, you're going to get a lot back out of it. The other thing it does come with is a similar lanyard strap. So it means if you can team teach as well. You'll notice on there it says up to 5 microphones. That we've got some hardware that we can put into the back of this system. So it gives us the opportunity to have 5 microphones in one space working simultaneously. The other thing it gives us the opportunity to do, if we've got 2 neighbouring classrooms which might be open plan, we can actually program the microphones so they won't cross over. So in one instance, an example of that is the teacher mic will be A, the student mic will be C. The other room, the neighbouring room or the neighbouring space will program the microphone. So this is B and this is D. They're not going to cross over. What it means though is they're still picking up the signal. We just zero or mute those unwanted channels. The flexibility is though you can bring those microphones into the other space and actually just raise that volume back up. You can have all those microphones working off the one system. So if you bring 2 groups into one room, you can bring all those microphones with you and adjust those volume settings.
Just a couple of questions, Jarrod, while you were talking there, and just to reinforce it, usually the Juno is mounted at the front left or right corner of the room. And again, that's because we want to send the sound in the general direction that the teacher is going to be facing in the classroom. And we don't need to worry about putting it at the front of the room because Front Row has their own proprietary system called Adapter, which manages that feedback, which Jarrod's going to talk about in a moment. And that was the other question, how do we manage feedback? So stay tuned for Jarrod's answer to that question. Student PFM, I'll cover that for you, Jarrod. With the PFM or personal FM, that's the stuff that deaf or hearing impaired kids might get fitted with through our hearing services providers to connect them with their hearing aids. The Front Row product, we can give you solutions that allow you to give full compatibility regardless of the brand of system that the kids are using. So whether they're using the Roger system or they're using a Cochlear mini mic, we can make all of that stuff work with our Front Row products, whether we're connecting it to the audio output or providing a proprietary third-party receiver. For the Roger system, the point being is it doesn't matter what you have, and moving into the future as products will evolve, your investment in the Front Row product is one that is not going to leave you out cold when someone turns up with something different. We are confident we will always be able to make it work.
So we just had that question come through from Andrew, from someone in the participants that spoke to Andrew then just about Adapto. So that's the actual software program that suppresses feedback. So I'm literally standing beside it at the moment. So there's no issue there. So some other
you can move closer if you want. Move closer even, Jarrod, just to give people an idea of how well that feedback works.
Yep.
You know, Jarrod can literally stick his head in the speaker.
Yep.
And no feedback. So it's pretty significant.
So some other brands actually tell you to put the system at the back of the room, and that's to make sure you don't get that feedback that's prevalent in that brand, in those brands. The other thing we have is, which is great, is Bluetooth wireless connectivity. So a lot of smart screens now give you that option, so you can connect wirelessly with the Juno system. If you don't have that, you can actually also connect with some AV cables on the side of it. So it gives you that connectivity to amplify and clarify those sounds for your AV. There's a function called Priority Teach. So this gives you audio control. When that's activated, it means that you now take control over all the audio that's coming through the sound system. And sometimes when it's a new user or even a trial, and it's particularly maybe preps 1s, 2s, they're a bit active in the classroom, it gives that teacher the control. So when you activate that, anytime the students are mucking around with the student mic, or you've got some audio playing, if you activate your microphone, it'll actually fade away that sound. As soon as you stop using your microphone, it will come back up again. So you have total control of what's going through the Juno. The OptiVoice gives you the chance to increase those high frequencies. So we spoke about unwanted noise, outside noise impacting your space. If you find you're in your neighbouring classroom is doing a singing song or whatever, they might be doing something that's a bit more active than what you guys are doing, and that's impacting your space, you can increase those higher frequencies to make sure that what you're saying is understood. I beg your pardon, understood. And make sure that it'll hit to the back of the room and it gets through and it will cut through that unwanted noise. We have a product called Lesson Capture. So this is an optional extra that we can provide you. This is a software program that gets downloaded onto your teacher's computer. What that now allows you to do is record all that content, like we've got this PowerPoint here today, record all that content and all the audio, my microphone, Andrew's microphone, and all the audio sources, that video we saw before, gets recorded and converted to an MP4 file. This gets then shared, stored on your share drive, and those students now can access that anytime they want. So if they've missed out on a week, they might be either ill or going away, you can actually record those lessons and that student can get access to that when they return. It's also great for remote learning and also great for personal review. We've just got a little feedback poll that we'd love you to participate in. So it's just 3 multiple questions about what you've taken out of today, what you would like to know more about, and what you would like to know in the future with other products. And then we'll also address your questions while that goes ahead.
Yeah, while they're doing that poll, Jarrod just had another question. It was from Tony from Brisbane. He was just asking if anybody else sold Front Row products. And I think while they've got a number of resellers around the country, it's fair to say that word of mouth has been supplying these products for near on 15 years, and I'd go as far to say that no one knows them better than us. So no matter where you are, the fact that we're in Melbourne does not put you at a disadvantage. We have Juno and will travel.
And I'm embarrassed to say, but my poll was not coming up. I apologise.
We can email that poll through to the people, Jarrod, afterwards.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll just do that. So it was only just a 3 quick questions. So it's about what you got out of today, what you'd like to know more about in depth about today's presentation, and maybe more about the products, maybe lesson capture things from that later on. Do we have any more questions there, Andrew, at all?
No, that's all, Jarrod. There's no further questions. I think you've covered everything really well. And I think this is an opportunity, as you said, to send the video on to the people who didn't get a chance to join us today. And also for you to connect with us to allow us to tell you more about the next slide, which is where you can tell people about what we're going to offer. But just a late question in here from Anonymous, just about, can you connect the system to the PA or the paging system? You know, hopefully they were, maybe I wasn't clear earlier when I talked about what the Front Row product offers, but yes, you can. If you have an endpoint in the classroom like the Front Row Juno, you can connect it to the network with a module that we have to add to that, and that will allow you to connect it to your PA or paging system. But you do need the Front Row Conductor server. There'll be another webinar coming up soon about Front Row Conductor. We don't want to go too much into that today, but the short answer is yes.
So from here, guys, what we offer you is obviously a video link to this webinar. We can give you any link for the references or sources we use to create this webinar. Product information, if you want anything on the Juno, To Go or Conductor. We also offer you free trials. So if you've liked what you've seen today and you want to actually experience the difference in the classroom, we're quite happy to send you a system or two, and you can utilize them and see what it does in the classroom yourself. for you guys today. If you decide to then purchase anything, we offer free delivery or lesson capture. And as I said before, we've supplied schools already in the NT. We've supplied schools in far north WA and far north Queensland. So we continue with online staff and training and support. I'll just pass you on my details. So Andrew and I, we would like to thank you for your participation today. If you do want any more information, here are my details here with both my email and my mobile. And on behalf of Andrew and I, on behalf of myself, I'm sure Andrew can say goodbye, but I thank you very much for your participation today.
Thanks, Jarrod. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for attending. We're grateful for you taking the time, and we know we will hear from you soon, or you're going to hear from us. See you later.